Today's true scary story is about a girl who had a demon follow her around her entire life. Today's submitter's name is Melanie, and Melanie has 3 different tribes, native tribes, in her bloodline: Choctaw, Cherokee, and Inuit, Eskimo. Her grandfather was actually the shaman of their Cherokee tribe, and she called him Pa. Now, Pa would always warn her and her 4 siblings about Native American folklore. So as far back as they can remember, all the women in her bloodline have been sensitives, including her. Her grandmother would see mist, like black mist in the corner of her eye. She would hear whispers. She would see things. Her mother actually in college had a friend that had a Ouija board, and her mother talked the girl out of having the Ouija board and was like, "Give it to me, I'll get rid of it for you." And the girl gave it to her. She got rid of it for her. She didn't say how, but that night after she got rid of the Ouija board, she was sleeping on her bed and there was a shelf above her, and the shelf collapsed on her. And right before it happened, she just had this feeling to put up her hands, and she put up her hands and she stopped the shelf from falling on her head, which could have potentially unalived her. Melanie said that the earliest time that she remembers anything crazy or spooky happening to her was when she was about 3 or 5 years old. And it doesn't stop there. It continues throughout to this day. So that's a little backstory of her, but now we're going to start getting into what's happening to her. So when she was about 5 years old, her and her family, her brothers, her siblings, her mom, her dad, went to go visit her Pa and Nana in rural southwest Oklahoma. Now in that area, there is no cell service, and there still isn't any cell service to this day. And that is important to note for the story. So one day, her and her brothers and her cousins are all playing outside, and they're playing in this light that her Pa had installed, making sure that they are not like out in the dark, but they are in the woods. So they're playing and they hear all these noises in the woods, occasional howl, the crickets chirping, when all of a sudden everything just goes silent. And they know from their Pa giving them all of the information that he had about the Native American folklore that this is not a good sign. They stand still and they're just all looking at each other. They're scared. And then they hear this crack from the woods, and they bolt inside. And Melanie was the last kid to get inside. And before she went inside, she turned around and she looked into the woods and she saw this figure. It was this black figure with red glowing eyes. So Melanie gets really quiet. She doesn't say anything. I think this is just how she deals with things from reading her story. And she goes inside and she just grabs her father's leg and she just hugs him. So then she goes to sleep, right? Later on that night, she wakes up in the middle of the night and she goes to the crack of her door and she opens it a little bit, and she can hear all of the adults whispering, and they sound concerned. She doesn't know what they're saying, but they sound concerned. Then she sees her father and her grandfather and her uncle, I believe. It was all men, all the men in her family, grabbed weapons to go outside and look for something. They went outside to go look for something. Now, she didn't know what, but she figured that it probably had something to do with what had happened earlier. So she then decides that she's going to pretend like she had a nightmare so that she can go talk to her mother and her grandmother. So she goes outside in the living room and she goes and sits on her mother's lap and she tells her mom she had a nightmare.